Harry comes out and gives this interview in which he not only says he doesn't know how long the king has left to live.
I don't know how much longer my father has. He won't speak to me because of this security stuff.
Which the royal family was like, hey, let's not talk about the king's mortality because you don't know, specifically because the king has refused to speak to you since February 2024. Now that is over a year ago.
She decided she didn't want to be a real princess because to be a real princess involves duty and responsibility, caring about other people. And so she just wanted to be a pretend princess in Hollywood. So she split her husband off from his royal family and then inked a $1 zillion deal with a bunch of media companies, and then all her projects flopped.
At 11:17 p.m. on December 15th, 2025, while London lay silent, the lights at Clarence House burned on. Behind sealed doors, King Charles III placed his signature on a constitutional instrument unlike anything enacted by a reigning monarch in modern British history. It was an emergency governance framework authorizing a conditional transfer of clearly defined executive royal powers to the Prince of Wales, Prince William, should the king's health impair his ability to fulfill his duties. Minutes later, Buckingham Palace issued a brief, meticulously phrased statement. His Majesty the King, it announced, had approved a special constitutional mechanism designed to ensure continuity, stability, and clarity in royal governance. The instrument reflected the King's confidence in the Prince of Wales and his commitment to protecting the constitutional integrity of the Crown under all circumstances. The words were measured. The consequences were anything but. This was neither abdication nor a traditional regency. Palace sources described it instead as a graduated authority transfer framework, one that would activate automatically if specific medical thresholds were reached, without political wrangling, parliamentary delay, or internal royal dispute. Its purpose was explicit: to anchor the line of succession in operational reality and prevent any internal vacuum of power. Officials familiar with the process revealed that the document had been in development for 8 months, driven by a convergence of pressures: the king's ongoing medical management, constitutional concerns raised by Privy Council advisors, and mounting unease over informal centers of influence forming within the palace ecosystem. At its heart, the move was a declaration of trust. Prince William was no longer merely the future king in theory. He was being institutionally prepared as a governing monarch in practice. Under the document, William received conditional authority over state-facing royal functions, senior household appointments, and approval rights over key constitutional communications, powers historically exercised solely by the sovereign. Senior aides confirmed that the Prince of Wales had been briefed on every clause, participated in detailed scenario planning, and accepted the framework only after safeguards were embedded to prevent overlap, confusion, or competing claims of authority. This was not personal, one constitutional advisor stressed. It was about continuity. The Crown cannot hesitate. Support across the royal establishment was broad. Princess and the Princess Royal was reportedly among the earliest advocates, arguing that the monarchy's legitimacy depended on clarity rather than sentiment. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was said to have backed the move privately, emphasizing public trust, stability, and the responsibility of preparing the next generation openly and responsibly. Yet, despite the image of unity, the path to the signature was fraught.
Meghan is a trained actress. What she does is that she studies people. She's not a good actress, but she is a trained one, right? She's been doing it her entire life. And there is no doubt that she studied Princess Diana. She studied her mannerisms towards Harry when he was a boy and the way that she grabs her face. And this is the psychopathic elements of what she does, putting a pregnancy text next to Princess Diana's hair, saying that she put her hands on the grave to have a conversation with her, bursting into tears. And she has convinced, there's a thing called in psychology called the Freudian transfer. She has convinced Harry that she is Princess Diana.
Multiple sources confirmed that Queen Camilla repeatedly challenged the document's scope and timing, raising objections through both formal review processes and informal channels. Her concerns centered on 3 issues: the speed of implementation, the concentration of authority in the Prince of Wales, and, most controversially, the exclusion of any expanded advisory role for herself. Camilla proposed what aides described as a central advisory position, arguing that as queen consort she should retain influence over ceremonial scheduling, discretionary household budgets, and strategic counsel during any transitional phase. She also objected strongly to clauses allowing William to authorize documents in the king's stead, calling the provision premature and destabilizing. Palace legal teams rejected these objections outright. Their reasoning was precise and unyielding. The British monarchy does not recognize derivative authority through marriage, and advisory access does not equate to executive power. Any attempt to formalize such a role, advisors warned, would introduce ambiguity and invite internal political maneuvering. Behind closed doors, the stakes were higher still. Royal insiders acknowledged concerns that the Queen's resistance was not purely procedural. Critics within the household believed her objections reflected a broader ambition to preserve personal influence and secure elevated status for her children within the aristocratic and institutional framework of the crown. Informal proposals circulated suggesting renewed pressure for hereditary titles, expanded ceremonial visibility, and long-term inclusion in royal-adjacent governance bodies. These ambitions collided head-on with the constitutional philosophy now guiding the monarchy. The line was drawn, one senior official said. Titles, inheritance, and authority cannot be expanded sideways. By mid-December, the king faced a decision: delay further or act decisively. On the evening of December 15th, he chose action. Only a small circle witnessed the signing: the Prince of Wales, the Princess Royal, the Lord Chamberlain, senior constitutional advisers, and the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Queen was not present. Palace sources confirmed the absence was deliberate. As the ink dried, the crown crossed a threshold quietly, legally, and irrevocably. What followed would reveal not only a transfer of power, but a collision between constitutional duty and personal ambition, one that would soon expose the monarchy's internal fault lines. The instrument signed on December 15th did not appear overnight. Its final form was the result of 8 months of structured preparation and sustained internal resistance. The process began discreetly in April 2025, when senior Privy Council advisors submitted a confidential memo to the king identifying a growing institutional risk: the lack of a legally automatic mechanism to transfer operational authority if the sovereign became temporarily incapacitated. Historical precedents existed only in fragments, none suited to the pace, scrutiny, and constitutional exposure of the modern monarchy. From the outset, Prince William was not treated as a passive heir, but as a central participant. Weekly briefings at Kensington Palace walked him through scenarios ranging from short-term incapacity to prolonged withdrawal from public duties. Those present said William insisted on strict limits: no symbolism without authority, no authority without accountability. By June, the framework had taken shape. Conditional triggers, clearly defined powers, and firm boundaries separating the king's retained prerogatives from those delegated to the Prince of Wales. The goal was clarity, not discretion. But that clarity became the source of conflict. Queen Camilla intervened formally in early July, requesting an extended review period in the name of institutional harmony. The request delayed progress by 3 weeks. In August, she objected to language naming the Prince of Wales as the sole conduit for executive decision-making during any health-related limitation. Through intermediaries, she argued that the Queen Consort should serve as a stabilizing figure, coordinating ceremonial flow, internal communications, and discretionary household spending. Constitutional advisors rejected the proposal unanimously. Their response was unequivocal. The monarchy's legitimacy derives from lineal succession, not marital proximity. Creating an embedded advisory role for the Queen Consort, especially one touching budgets or scheduling, would blur constitutional lines and establish a parallel authority structure. Tensions escalated in September when draft clauses explicitly empowered William to sign select documents on behalf of the crown. Camilla argued this would visually and politically diminish the reigning monarch, creating a perception of displacement. Princess Anne countered sharply, reminding the review committee that perception follows preparation, not the reverse. Indecision, she reportedly said, is what truly diminishes the crown. Privately, concerns grew that resistance was no longer about optics. Senior officials noted a pattern. Each delay coincided with renewed discussions about future positioning for the Queen's children. Informal suggestions emerged that during any transitional period, Camilla's son and daughter might receive elevated ceremonial recognition, potentially laying groundwork for future hereditary titles. Such ideas alarmed constitutional advisors. The document, one official remarked, was designed to eliminate political gravity wells, not create new ones. By November, patience within the palace had worn thin. Medical briefings underscored the unpredictability of the king's condition, heightening urgency. Catherine, Princess of Wales, quietly supported immediate execution, arguing that the public deserved certainty, not hesitation. The decisive moment arrived during a closed session at Sandringham on December 13th. The final draft was presented without provisions for expanded consort authority. Camilla objected. Her objection was recorded and overruled. 2 days later, the king signed. What began as constitutional housekeeping had become a definitive test of where power truly resides in the modern monarchy. The answer was now unmistakable and non-negotiable. By the time King Charles III signed the instrument, the conflict inside the palace had crystallized around a single question: what authority, if any, could proximity to the crown confer absent bloodline or statute? For Queen Camilla, this was no abstraction. From late August 2025 onward, she had sought to reposition herself as an indispensable stabilizing presence, framing her involvement as continuity rather than power. Her argument rested on experience, loyalty to the king, and the optics of a visible consort during periods of reduced royal activity. In practice, her proposals went much further. Memoranda circulated by her advisors outlined a central coordination role granting influence over court circular scheduling, ceremonial funding, and internal messaging, areas that shape public perception and internal balance. More troubling was language referencing the long-term integration of the Queen's family into the life of the crown. Senior officials interpreted this as an attempt to normalize the presence of Camilla's children within royal-adjacent governance, opening pathways to aristocratic elevation and eventual hereditary entitlement. Though no titles were named, the implication was clear. Princess Anne intervened decisively during a private briefing on September 21st at St. James's Palace. She delivered what attendees described as a constitutional correction, reminding advisors that a consort's role ends where executive authority begins. No modern precedent, she emphasized, supports inheritance or governance rights for consort offspring. Service is not succession, she reportedly said. Catherine reinforced the position from a different angle. In early October consultations with communications advisors, she warned that public confidence depended on visible discipline. Any suggestion that power could be redistributed through marriage, she argued, would reopen debates the monarchy had spent generations closing. Practical concerns reinforced these principles. Palace legal counsel warned that semi-formal consort influence would complicate command chains, dilute accountability, and invite internal lobbying, particularly if disputes arose between the Prince of Wales and the Queen Consort. Camilla rejected these assessments, arguing that exclusion would marginalize the sovereign's spouse at a moment when stability was critical. She raised concerns about being visibly sidelined, language aids interpreted as anxiety over diminishing relevance and leverage. The dispute peaked in early December when Camilla formally objected to clauses allowing William to authorize communications in the king's stead. She proposed alternative wording requiring consort concurrence. The Constitutional Council's response was swift. No additional veto points would be introduced. On December 13th at Sandringham, those limits were finalized. Camilla's proposals were excluded in their entirety. The final document referenced consort authority only in ceremonial terms. 2 days later, the Queen learned of the signing after the fact. For the first time since becoming Queen Consort, Camilla confronted an institutional reality she could not reshape. The crown had chosen lineal certainty over relational influence. By early December, the constitutional debate hardened into a confrontation between principle and proximity. Princess and Catherine stood at the center of the institutional response, not as rivals to the Queen consort, but as guardians of boundaries the crown could not blur. On December 5th, a closed constitutional briefing at St. James's Palace brought together senior legal advisors, Privy Council representatives, and select royals. There, Princess Anne delivered the bluntest statement of the process. There is no constitutional space in which a consort governs, delegates, or inherits authority. The crown survives because its limits are observed. She cited precedent, the Regency Acts, the abdication crisis of 1936, post-war codification of royal functions, each reinforcing the same principle. Marriage grants status, not sovereignty. Catherine followed with a focus on legitimacy. Meeting separately with communications advisors, she argued that any perception of competing power centers would undermine the instrument's purpose. The public would accept preparation, she said, but not maneuvering. Her warning outlined 3 risks: narrative confusion over who truly governs, revived tensions over favoritism, and irreversible damage if consort offspring appeared to benefit from transitional arrangements. Clarity, she concluded, must be visible, not merely legal. By December 8th, the Palace Council redrafted the instrument to remove any language implying consultative obligation to the Queen consort. Advisory access remained informal, structural roles did not. Camilla objected immediately, calling the revisions a slight. Princess Anne responded with constitutional finality. Optics follow authority, not the reverse. At the December 13th Sandringham meeting, Camilla voiced opposition and departed early. 2 days later, the king signed. When December 15th arrived, the constitutional battle ended without spectacle. Security tightened at Clarence House. Phones were surrendered. No photographers attended. This was not meant to look historic, it was meant to be irreversible. At 11:17 p.m., King Charles III entered the signing room with only those deemed essential. No representatives of the Queen consort were present. The document was reviewed clause by clause. Charles signed slowly and deliberately. Princess Anne countersigned. The Archbishop offered a prayer of stewardship. Within minutes, the instrument was sealed and transmitted securely to the Prime Minister, Cabinet Secretary, and Commonwealth governments. Once notified, the mechanism became internationally recognized and irreversible. By morning, Buckingham Palace released its statement. Brief, legal, supportive. No mention of dissent. This was preparation, not crisis. William and Catherine continued scheduled engagements, signaling stability, and returned to Gatcombe Park. Camilla, learning of the signing after transmission, reacted with anger, accusing aides of engineering her exclusion. Informal channels stirred briefly, then fell silent as palace communications shut down parallel messaging. By December 16th, the narrative had settled. Experts praised foresight. Media highlighted readiness. Notably absent was any reference to a consort role. In the days that followed, the monarchy normalized the new order. Briefings included William by default. Reporting lines adjusted quietly. Authority flowed without performance. For Catherine, the moment validated restraint. For Anne, vigilance continued. For Camilla, leverage diminished. Invitations ceased. Influence narrowed. Proposals for titles for her children were shelved as constitutionally untenable. Public reaction remained calm. By January 2026, the event had faded into institutional memory. Inside the palace, its significance endured. The signing of December 15th did more than plan for contingency. It reaffirmed hierarchy, bloodline over marriage, statute over sentiment, structure over ambition. Succession was no longer theoretical. It was secured.